I didn't invite a single one of my siblings to my wedding. And no, I don't regret it. My name is Sylvie Harren, and I'm the youngest of 5. You'd think being the baby of the family might come with a little extra love, maybe even a few privileges. But for me, it meant invisibility. While my brothers and sister grew up close in age and tightly knit, I was the afterthought, the tag-along, the kid they barely acknowledged, except when it was inconvenient to have me around. People say family is forever. But what if your family never made space for you in the first place? What if they deliberately excluded you from the most important days of their lives? Again and again. That's my story. And on my wedding day, I decided I wouldn't pretend anymore. I wouldn't play the role of the forgotten little sister who smiled through her own erasure. What followed after I left them off the guest list? Well, let's just say, they finally noticed me. I used to believe that one day, they'd finally see me. That if I was quiet enough, kind enough, good enough, someone in my family would finally say, "Hey, she matters." But that day never came. I was 10 years old when the pattern began. My oldest brother, Mike, was getting married. I remember sitting at the kitchen table, legs swinging under the chair, begging my mom to let me wear one of her necklaces to the wedding. I'd already imagined the whole day, how I'd watch Mike stand at the altar, how I'd smile at his bride as she walked down the aisle. But then came the conversation. "Sweetie," my mom said gently, "Mike and his fiancée are having a child-free wedding. You're not going." I blinked. "But I'm not like other kids. I'll be good." She smiled, patted my head, and said something like, "You'll understand when you're older." I didn't. I sat in my room while the rest of the family got dressed in formal clothes and drove off to a celebration I wasn't allowed to be part of. That day, I learned something important. In my family, I was optional, forgettable. When Jonah got engaged 2 years later, I was 12. I was quieter then, more careful. I'd stopped whining, stopped asking for things that might seem like a bother. So when my parents broke the news, another child-free wedding, I said nothing. I just smiled a little and nodded. I made sure not to cry in front of them this time. But that night, I buried my face in my pillow and cried until my chest hurt. It became a ritual. Marla's wedding when I was 15? "No guests under 16, she said. "Sorry, Sylvie, it wouldn't be fair to the others." I wasn't just some other. I was her sister. I asked to be the exception. I pleaded. And when I raised my voice, just once, my parents grounded me. For 6 months. Apparently, asking to be included was disrespectful. By the time Isaac got engaged, I was 17. He didn't even say the words out loud. He just sent out announcements, and I never received one. I heard from a cousin that the age limit was 18, and my birthday was still a few months away. I didn't cry this time. I didn't even flinch. I had learned my lesson. What broke me, though, was realizing that they'd invited Amanda, my cousin, who had just barely turned 18. They drew the line right before me, and I knew deep down that it wasn't just about age. It was about value. I didn't have any, not to them. From 10 to 17, I was systematically erased from the family's most important memories, and no one even thought to explain why. They just assumed I'd get over it, but I didn't. I grew up quietly, fading further into the background of family events. Holidays came and went with small talk and shallow gestures. No one asked me about school, about my dreams, or about how I felt being left out 4 times. And I stopped offering up anything of myself. Because what's the point of sharing your life with people who never wanted you in theirs? They were a unit. I was just nearby. And the worst part? I loved them. I idolized them. For the longest time, I blamed myself. I thought maybe if I were brighter, funnier, more helpful, I'd be enough to make them love me the way I wanted. But I wasn't, and they didn't. That's when something in me began to shift. Quietly, without drama. Just a slow realization that if they hadn't made space for me in their happiest days, I wasn't going to keep begging for scraps of connection. I stopped trying. I left home for college a week after my 18th birthday. I didn't cry at the airport when my mom hugged me. I didn't feel much of anything. No big farewell, no surprise gathering from my siblings. Just a few generic texts. Good luck, kiddo. Let us know if you need anything. The same kind of messages you'd send to a distant cousin you barely know. That's when it hit me. They didn't hate me. I simply didn't register. I wasn't someone they thought about. Not when they planned their weddings. Not when they moved into new homes or had babies. I was a background detail in their lives. So, I started doing something radical. I stopped hoping. I didn't cut them off, not yet, but I started shrinking my emotional investment. I showed up for holidays out of obligation. I responded to group texts when necessary, but I stopped reaching out first. I stopped trying to belong. And then I met Nolan. He wasn't flashy or loud, but he noticed things. The kind of person who remembered the name of your childhood dog after one conversation. The first time I talked about my family, it wasn't even meant to be a deep moment. I was just venting about how weird it felt to be so excluded growing up. They didn't invite you? Not once? He asked, stunned. 4 weddings, I said with a flat smile. 4 child-free policies. 4 times I stayed home. And none of them even reconsidered? You were, what, 10? 15? I nodded. That's not normal, Sylvie. That's cruel. Hearing it out loud from someone else, it undid something inside me. I'd convinced myself for years that I was being dramatic, that I needed to just get over it. But Nolan didn't let it slide. He looked me right in the eye and said, "You were a child. That kind of rejection sticks with people." I think that's when I began to truly understand. It wasn't me. I wasn't too sensitive, or too needy, or too immature. I was just a kid who wanted to be loved and included, and my family chose convenience and uniformity over compassion. When Nolan proposed 2 years later, I was overwhelmed with joy. Not just because I loved him, but because this time, finally, this time I'd get to be part of a wedding. My own. And right away, I knew one thing. I wasn't going to invite them. It wasn't some dramatic decision. I didn't scream into a pillow or write angry letters. I just didn't include them. No calls, no invites, no explanations. I created a guest list filled with people who had actually been there for me. Friends from college, Nolan's kind parents, a few coworkers who'd become family in every way that mattered. When my mom called one afternoon, her tone sugary sweet, I knew it was coming. "So, Sylvie," she chirped, "how's the wedding planning coming along?" "Good," I replied carefully. "That's great. Just wondering, your brothers and sister haven't gotten their invitations yet. Maybe something got lost in the mail?" I paused. Then, without hesitation, I said, "They weren't lost. I didn't send them." Silence. Heavy, disbelieving silence. And then came the storm. "How could you do this?" she gasped. "They're your family." I took a deep breath. They didn't think I was family when they left me out of every wedding. Not one of them even asked if I wanted to be there, so I'm just giving them the same courtesy. That was different. You were young. It wasn't personal. But it felt personal. Every single time. She started crying, switching to her usual line. "Family is all you have. You'll regret this." Maybe. But at that moment, I didn't feel guilt. I felt relief. I was finally drawing a boundary they couldn't cross. Not with tears, not with guilt, not with shame. I wasn't punishing them. I wasn't trying to hurt them. I just wasn't inviting them. And that made them furious. It didn't take long for everything to implode. The day after I told my mom, the family group chat, yes, the one I'd been muted from for over a year, lit up like a fireworks display. Rachel, my sister, was first. She always was. "Hey, Sylvie. Mail's weird these days, huh? None of us got our invites. Just checking in." I didn't reply. Then Jonah followed, less subtle. "What's going on? Are we not invited to your wedding?" I stared at my phone, heart pounding, but hands steady. For once, I didn't feel like the little girl who needed to explain herself. I felt like a grown woman who didn't owe anyone anything. I left their messages on read. No apology, no explanation. Just silence. Nolan noticed I was quiet over dinner and asked gently, "Do you want to talk about it?" I handed him the phone. He read the texts, then placed it down. "You don't owe them a thing," he said. "I know," I whispered. but I also know what comes next. The next morning, it wasn't texts. It was a knock on my apartment door. My parents. No warning. My mom stormed in the second I cracked it open. Her face was flushed, not from concern, but from the sheer indignation of being ignored. "What are you thinking, Sylvie?" she snapped. "Not inviting your siblings to your wedding? What kind of daughter does that?" I stayed calm. The kind who got left out of 4 weddings and learned not to beg for love. She blinked. My dad stepped forward, voice stern. "You're acting childish." "I was a child," I said sharply, "when they told me I wasn't old enough, when they looked me in the eye and said I didn't belong. Don't you dare call me childish for finally making peace with the truth." My mom's face crumpled. "They didn't mean to hurt you." "But they did," I replied, "and I'm done pretending they didn't." They left frustrated, unable to convince me. And that's when the messages started getting ugly. Chris texted, "You're selfish, Sylvie. We included you in our lives whenever we could. You're ruining this family over old drama." Rachel posted a Facebook status. "Family is forever, even when some people forget what that word means." Isaac messaged me something short and bitter. "You're being petty. Grow up." I didn't answer. I blocked them one by one. I could feel the old guilt trying to worm its way back in. That same sickly, gnawing feeling that maybe I was being too harsh. Maybe I was doing the very thing I hated, cutting people out. But then Nolan held me one night while I scrolled through their insults and said softly, "I'm proud of you." "For what?" I asked. "For not shrinking anymore, for choosing yourself." That sentence rewired something inside me. The next week, things escalated again. My aunt, who hadn't called me in years, suddenly rang. I answered, wary. "Sylvie, honey," she began in that syrupy tone that always made me feel like a toddler. "I just don't understand why you're doing this. Family is family." "It's not about the wedding," I said flatly. "It's about the years before that. You didn't see it, but I lived it." "They were young. You're old enough now to move on." "I did move on. This is me moving on." She sighed dramatically. "Well, I just hope you don't regret it someday." I hung up. Then came the final straw. My mom showed up again. Sunday afternoon. I was in pajamas, halfway through brunch with Nolan. She knocked. I opened. "We need to talk," she said immediately. "No, we don't," I replied, blocking the door. She pushed slightly. "Your siblings are devastated. Do you really want to destroy this family over—" I stopped her cold. "They destroyed it when they decided I didn't matter. This is just me finally believing them." She started crying, loud theatrical sobs like I hadn't heard since I was a child. "You'll regret this, Sylvie. One day you'll miss us." "I don't think I will," I said calmly. "I miss what I wished we were, but you've shown me who you really are." Nolan stepped in then. "It's time to go." She looked between us, me resolute, him unwavering, and left. Later that night, Chris texted from a different number after I'd blocked his usual one. "You slammed the door in Mom's face. What the hell happened to you?" Nolan glanced over my shoulder, read it, and said, "Block him too." And I did. I blocked them all. Every sibling, every guilt-trip relative, every person who thought their nostalgia outweighed my reality. And for the first time in my life, the silence felt like freedom. The morning of my wedding was quiet, almost unnervingly so. No angry texts, no missed calls, no more attempts to guilt me into changing my mind. I remember sitting at the edge of the bed in a silk robe, sunlight spilling through the curtains, feeling like I was holding my breath. Nolan and I had decided not to do the traditional first look, but we'd written letters to each other instead. His was waiting for me on the vanity, tucked inside an envelope with my name written in his calm, neat handwriting. "M, today we make a new start, one that's ours, no expectations, no pressure, no ghosts at the table, just us, and the people who've shown up for us consistently and truly. I'll see you soon. You're not alone anymore." I reread that last line twice. I wasn't alone. The venue we chose was small but perfect. A hidden garden behind an old inn, where vines curled around wooden beams and fairy lights danced overhead like stars. There were maybe 60 people there, just enough for laughter to ripple, for tears to be shared, for joy to feel real and unforced. As I stepped into my dress, my best friend and maid of honor, Lanny, fussed over the zipper and smiled. "You look calm," she said. "I feel different," I replied. "I don't know if it's joy or relief. Maybe both." She touched my arm. "It's peace. You earned it." There was a brief moment, just before I walked down the aisle, where I thought of them. Of Mike's tuxedo, Jonah's loud laugh, Marla's overdone curls, Isaac's crooked grin. I imagined them sitting in the back, maybe pretending to be supportive, but judging, whispering, distracting. And then I looked forward and saw Nolan. All that weight, the years of being left out, erased, sidelined, just dropped away. As I walked toward him, I felt something shift. I wasn't the forgotten little sister anymore. I wasn't the invisible tag-along. I was a bride, a woman, someone loved loudly, fully, without condition. We exchanged vows under a wooden arch draped in wisteria. Nolan promised to never make me feel small, to always choose truth over comfort. I promised to protect my own worth, to never chase love that comes with strings or silence. When we kissed, the applause wasn't thunderous. It was warm. It felt like the sound of real affection, not forced family obligation. At the reception, we danced barefoot under the lights, laughing like kids and holding each other like we'd known every version of ourselves through every year. At some point, my cousin Violet, one of the few relatives who had always treated me kindly, pulled me aside. "You probably don't want to hear this," she whispered, "but your mom and Marla are apparently having a dinner party tonight, like an alternate event." I blinked, then laughed. "Seriously?" She nodded. "Some extended family went, but most of them said it was weird and awkward." I shrugged. "Let them have it. If they need a performance to feel important, that's their business." I could tell Violet expected me to be more upset, but I wasn't. Not even a little. That dinner wasn't a protest, it was proof. Proof that even now, they couldn't understand why I'd finally said no. Later in the evening, as Nolan and I shared our last dance, I looked around the garden and took it all in. The lights, the music, the people who were really there, for me. And that's when it sank in. I hadn't lost anything. I'd finally stopped begging for crumbs from people who wouldn't set a place for me at the table. And instead, I'd built a new one, filled with people who saw me, who loved me, who chose me. That was the day I took my life back. In the days after the wedding, I waited for the final wave of fallout. The silence had been too perfect, too complete. And sure enough, it didn't last. The first message came a week later, from Rachel, of course. Sent from an unknown number, since I'd already blocked her main one. "Saw pictures from your wedding. A garden? Looked casual. But I guess that's your style." No congratulations, no reflection. Just a passive-aggressive dig wrapped in artificial politeness. I didn't reply. Then came the whispers from extended family. Messages from people I hadn't spoken to in years. They said things like, "Your mom's been crying every day. Your siblings are heartbroken. This is all just a misunderstanding, isn't it?" But it wasn't. It was years of being pushed aside. It was being told, again and again, that I didn't matter. And when I finally acted on that truth, it wasn't revenge. It was reality. One afternoon, Nolan and I were on the couch, watching reruns and finishing leftover cake, when he asked gently, "Do you regret it? Not inviting them?" I didn't even have to think. No. I thought I would. I really did. But I don't miss them. I don't miss the feeling of being tolerated instead of loved. He smiled and squeezed my hand. "Good. You deserve better." A few days later, one last message came through. Rachel again, this time from yet another number. "You've destroyed this family. I hope you're happy." I read it. I breathed in. Then I deleted it without a word. Because here's the thing. I'm happy. Not in spite of losing them, but because I stopped chasing them. I stopped twisting myself into someone more convenient, more palatable, more forgettable, just to earn a seat at a table that was never built for me in the first place. I used to believe that family was everything. Now I believe that love is everything. And love doesn't guilt you. Love doesn't ignore your tears. Love doesn't show up only when there's a spotlight. Love shows up when there's silence, when it's inconvenient, when it's hard. And on the day I stood in a white dress under a canopy of lights and whispered vows to a man who had chosen me over and over again, I knew I'd finally found it. This isn't a story about revenge. It's a story about release, about finally letting go of people who never made space for me, and about the quiet, powerful joy of building a life where I am no longer invisible. I didn't invite them to my wedding, and I will never regret it.